Okay, welcome everyone. And we could already say our good Erev Shabbos, and it's wonderful to have everybody joining us. A special welcome to David Silverman, who's joining us on Facebook. David used to be here every night. We've been missing you, David, and it's great to have you join us. We are sponsored by A.B. Spry and family for the tefillah that children should get into yeshiva. Quickly, easily. We are sponsored by Baruch Ian, Lila Nishmas Estebas Yoni, Yaakov Chaim and Abba, Avram ben Shmuel HaKayin. We'll also learn L'Refuah Shalema for Marshall's brother, Mordechai ben Sari Yehudis. We'll learn from my Shver, Avigdor Aryeh ben Rivka, for Chaya Tzipora Bas Rezel. They should all have a L'Refuah Shalema b'Seich Shar Chayli Yisrael. We are holding on this wonderful Thursday night 5 lines from the bottom of Daf Ayin Ches Amid Beis. And did I put in the right Daf number? Yes, I did. Haisa Yoda Asuya Kikitafris. If, let's say, she put her hand facing down like a slope, in a downward motion, and so that when he threw the get, it slipped right out of her hand. V'zorkula, afal pishe get liyada, even though the get reached and touched her hand, eina megareshes. So the Gemara says, yeah, but even though it didn't adhere to her hand, and her hand wasn't a base kibble because her hand was sloped downward, but it fell to her feet, which is within her 4 amas. Amai haki nafel ba'arbas amas didaka nafel. It fell within her 4 amas, so she should be divorced because it's within her 4 amas. Says the Gemara, b'doloi nach. It's talking about where it didn't land. Before it landed, it got swept away by the wind, or it got burnt by fire. It didn't land. So the Gemara says, but doesn't she have an ear space of 4 amas also? V'tigrash me'avira d'arba amas. It should be, she should be divorced because it was in the ear space of her 4 amas. So the Gemara says, you want to resolve from this that even though a person acquires the 4 amas around them, but they don't have an acquisition of the ear space of the 4 amas, and tifshay t'bay Rebbe Lazar, and this would be a resolution of a question that Rebbe Lazar asked, Arba amas she'amru, yesh lehem aver or ein lehem aver, does a person have ear rights or not? Tifshay t'ein lehem aver, because it says that if it goes into the ear space and then was swept away, says the Gemara, she's standing by the edge of the river, and therefore, when her hand was sloped, it wasn't going to go into her possession. It was going to be swept away from the river. It's going to be swept away by the river, and therefore, she's not divorced. We start now the new Mishnah on Ayin Tes Amud Aleph as we welcome in Gedalia Engel, Moshe Jackanin, Ilya Shutman, Nachman Chapler. It's interesting. I just realized I didn't say hello to everybody. So Baruch Ian is joining us. What's your name? iPhone 6. What's your name? Okay. Yes.
Me?
Yes.
Nathan Goldman. Sorry.
Nathan Goldman, it's wonderful to have you. It's a veritable delight. Saba is joining us. Eddie Chazan is joining us. Chaim Krainer, Rabbi Kran, Shelley Zeitman, Yisrael Fisher, Berish Gesseman, and Itchy is here. Itchy, good to see you. Moshe Lehman, Menachem Yemansky, Aaron Sway, Dr. Guy, Marshall Castle, Nachman Chapler, Dr. Black, Ruvain Pollack, Ali Engel, Ilya Shutman, Richard Rosenzweig, Moshe Jackman, Irving Fishbaum, David Silverman, David Healthcott, Ankol Oloshin. Says the Heilige Mishnah, Hoysoi Medes al Rosh Hagag. if she was standing on the top of the roof, and the roof is hers, v'zorkula, and he threw it to her, kevan she'egia la'avir hagag, once it reached the ear space of the roof, and we'll see it's talking about a roof that had a makkah, a parapet, so it's not in danger of being swept away by the wind. Harizu b'geresh, she's divorced. Hu milmala v'hi milmata. He is on the roof, and she's below in the courtyard. That's hers. V'zarkula, kevan sheyotza mirshus hagag, once it goes over the rooftop, over the parapet, into her ear space, into the ear space of her courtyard, even if afterwards nimchak, it gets erased, or nisraf, or it gets burnt, not that the fire was there from before, because then it's getting ready to go le'ibud, to perish, but even if a fire gets it before it lands, harizum gereshes, she's divorced. So the Gemara asks right away, when it goes into her ear space of the roof, why is she divorced before it lands? But the holy minter, it's not guarded, it could be swept away by the wind. It's talking about a roof that has a parapet, that has a fence. No, here it's talking about where it's within 3 tvachim from the floor of the roof. We know the rule of lavud. The kol pachas mishloishes samach legag, whatever is within 3 tvachim near the roof, kegag dummy. It's like the floor of the roof, and therefore she's divorced. Hu milmala, if he's above and she's below, as soon as it sails over the parapet into her ear space, she's divorced. But again, the Gemara asks, but it's not protected. V'alei minter. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel, it's talking about where she has a very high wall around her courtyard. The wall below is higher than the area of the roof, and therefore, when it sails over the parapet, it's within the wall of her courtyard, and therefore it's protected. The mechitza below is oitfeis al elyonis, towers above the roof. So now here we say that if it's in the airspace of the courtyard, she's already divorced as if it landed. Now, there is a whole question in Hilchos Shabbos, because we know that to be chayiv for hoitzah, there has to be an akira and a hanocha. It has to be uprooted and it has to land. And the question is, do we say that when something sails in the airspace, it's as if it landed? That's called kluta kemi shehun kedamya. That if it's intercepted by the airspace, it's considered like it landed. A nafkamina would be if, for example, I threw a football from one Rishus HaYachid to another Rishus HaYachid, and there was a Rishus HaRabim in between. So if we say Kluta Kami Shehun Chadamya, that if it's intercepted by the airspace, it's as if it landed, then I would be chayiv, because then I'd be throwing it from a Rishus HaYachid to a Rishus HaRabim, which is an Issa D'Oraisa. So this is a big machlokes. This Rebbe holds Kluta Kami Shehun Chadamya. The Rabbanan do not. So now the Gemara argues very convincingly. Amalei Rab Abba L'Ula. So Rab Abba says to Ula, welcome Michael. Rab Abba says to Ula, Kaman Kerebi. The fact that we say that if the get sails into the airspace of a courtyard and then it got erased by the rain, she's divorced because we say it's as if it landed. This must be like Rebbe, Dama Kluta Kimishon Chadamya. That if it's intercepted by her airspace, it's as if it landed there. Amalei says, no, this has nothing to do with that. Afilu Teimer Rabbanan. Ad kan loy pligi Rabbanan alei de Rebbe. ela le'inyan Shabbos. That's only by Hilchas Shabbos. Because by Hilchas Shabbos, there's a din of hanocha, that it has to come to rest on the ground. And the Rabbanan hold, if it's in the airspace, it's not rested on the ground. Aval hacha mishum in turehu. It has to come in her airspace, and it has to be guarded. Once it's within the airspace and there's walls all around, it's already guarded. It doesn't have to rest on the ground. It just has to be protected. V'akaminta. It's protected. That the walls of the courtyard tower above the roof, so that as soon as it sails over the parapet, it's protected by her walls. You're saying it's as if it landed in our property? That would be like Rebbe. That if it's intercepted in the airspace, it's as if it landed. Amalei, no. I feel a time Rabbanan. It's even going according to Rabbanan. Because I'd kind of pligi Rabbanan alei de Rebbe Elalinian Shabbos for Hilchas Shabbos, because by Shabbos it has to physically be noch. It has to physically rest. When it's in the airspace, it didn't rest. Avalacha, it has to be in her domain, which is the airspace also, and just has to be protected. Avalacha mishum in tureyu, it has to be protected. V'akaminter, and it is protected. Just getting underway on a beautiful Thursday night / Erev Shabbos Kodesh. Big thing that it's tonight is already Erev Shabbos. The person could be Mekayim already preparing, doing achana for Shabbos. You know that people underestimate the power of Hakana l'Shabbos. Yerushalmi says, Toyameha chayim ezachu, that if you taste the food to see that it's tasty for Shabbos, you're zoicha tarichas yamim. Imagine the chashivas of preparing for Shabbos. Toyameha chayim ezachu. The Shari Tshuva writes that if a person sweats, like you're in a bungalow, and you're standing by the fire. It's already hot, and you're standing by the fire. You're sweating. He says sweat in honor of Shabbos is considered demois. It's considered tears. It's a little bit it's a little comical, but you'll read in advice columns that they give advice how a housewife could cut onions without her eyes tearing. Put it beforehand in the freezer, all kinds of advice. And it's a little comical because I have an idea that one of the main reasons why we eat onions on Erev Shabbos is in order that we should cry as we prepare for Shabbos. Welcome, everyone. It's great to have you. A royal world welcome. I see you, I'm happy. My grandchildren just walked in, and our wonderful children. Zaidi is learning Torah. If you want, you could see all the people. If you want to come around, you could see all the people over here.
Want to see me too? I'm getting out of here.
Yeah. Well, listen, they're used to, they're big children. They're used to all kinds of people. Anyway,
Simcha's kids, right?
This is Simcha's wonderful children.
Yeah,
that's right.
Guys.
That's Saba. Okay. Anyway, so down the Gemara tells us as nimchak, if it gets erased. That's only if it gets erased as it was sailing down. In other words, it already went over the parapet and it's on its descent. But if it was erased by the rain while it was still going up, it didn't descend yet into her domain. Why? Because my time it never was ready to land into our property, and therefore it's never considered. Remember, it doesn't have to land, it just has to be in Ture, but this was never gonna start to land in her property. The same thing as I explained when we learned in the Mishnah, where it says nisraf, where it got burnt, and we said that she's going to be divorced. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba Baravu, Lo Shanu Ela Shekidem Get L'Dedaika. That's only if the fire wasn't there when he threw the get to her. Aval Kodma Dleika L'Get, but if the fire was already there, remember we said if she was holding her hand as a slope, and it was going to fall into the nar, so it was ready to be Hailach L'Ibud, so then she's not going to be divorced. Here also, if the fire was already there from before, it was a pre-existing fire, then it's no good. My time it may call L'Sreifa Kaza, because it was going L'Ibud, that's not a good guess. Amrav Chista, Rishuyais Chalukais Begittin. Different domains make a difference by get. Now, you remember we had the case of where he threw the get in the courtyard and it fell on the log, and we said that if the log is 4 by 4 amas, or high 10 fachim, or had a shem levai, she's not divorced. Because we said a person lends only one place, he doesn't lend two places. So here, the Gemara over here says this idea. How does the elder know this? It's a Mishnah. If she was standing on top of the roof, and he threw it to her, as soon as the get reaches the airspace of the roof, she's divorced. Now, if the chatzir below was also hers and the airspace was also hers, then why does it have to come into the airspace of the roof? The courtyard is also hers. It must be begagdi day v'chatzir day, his roof and his courtyard. But if it was his roof, then hold on a second, hold everything. If it was his roof, then why should she be divorced? Even if it comes into the airspace of the roof, it's not our roof. Oh, it must be. It must be, it's her roof and his courtyard. Oh, but then we're going to get confused. Look at the sefer. If he's above and she's below, and he threw it to her, as soon as it sails over the parapet on the descent, nimchak or nisraf, if it was erased or burnt, but if it's her roof and his courtyard, it's going into his courtyard. Why should she be divorced? Ela begagdi day, that must be, it's his roof, v'chatzidi day, v'chatzidi and her courtyard. So that's confusing. So the ratio is her roof and his courtyard, and the sefer is his roof and her courtyard. Ratio begagdi da v'chatzidi day, sefer begagdi day v'chatzidi da. Rather, it must be that in both cases, as we welcome in Philippe for our 29th Zoomer of the evening, says the Gemara, Elalav, it must be that both are his. The courtyard is his, the rooftop is his, but he gave her a loan of one place. Elalav the Aish Lamakim. So there we say, the Chad Makam Moishle Inshe, a person gives one premises, Trey Mekayim is Lai Moishle Inshe. So if he was throwing it to the courtyard, he gave her the courtyard. If he was throwing it to the roof, he gave her the roof. So the Gemara is not impressed with that raya. I'm like midday area who says then maybe the Reish is talking about where the roof is hers and the courtyard is his, and the Sefer is talking about where the roof is his and the courtyard is hers. And then Reish begagdi da v'chatzidi day, Sefer begagdi day v'chatzidi da. Amar Rava. Now Rava says, Shalosh midos begittin. There are three areas, three categories, three rules by get that are different than by Hilchos Shabbos. We right away know that one is going to be klud to Kamishom Chadanya. So let's see it inside. Amar Rava, and if you're just joining us, Philippe 4 lines from the bottom of Ayin Tesam and Aleph, just getting underway.
I only use my ears, Rabbi, thank you.
What?
I said I only use my ears when I learn the Gemara.
Well, I could send you a Gemara if you need one.
I know how to get one, thank you.
Yeah, it's a good idea. And if you can't follow in the Hebrew, you should follow in English.
I use my ears, thank you, Rabbi. You have a teacher, it's enough.
Okay. That's the way they used to, Philippe, that's the way they used to learn in the olden days.
I recognize that, Rabbi, thank you.
In the olden days, that was Torah Sheba'al Peh. If you remember, I told you that the reason why they didn't write down the Gemara is because they wanted to make sure that people should get a Rebbe. Now that we have the written Gemara, people don't need a Rebbe.
Okay, there are maybe other reasons too, but thank you.
Now,
you have to have a Rebbe.
We need you, Rabbi.
Yeah, all right. I'm glad. I need you too. So I'm a Rava. Sholish midos pigi. Hada am a Rebbe kluta kimishoncha. That which Rebbe says that if it's intercepted by the airspace of the Rishus Rabbim, it's as if it landed there. Upligi Rabbanan alei, and Rabbanan argue and say that it's not considered noch hani milulinyan Shabbos, because there the Rabbanan say just because it sailed in the airspace, it's not considered as if it landed. Aval hacha, but over here by get, it's not important for it to be stationary. It just has to be in her domain and be protected. Aval hacha mishum intureyu v'aminter. Once it's in her airspace and the walls are around the airspace where the get is, it's guarded. That's enough. That's number one. V'adamer of Chisda. Now here the Gemara tells us another interesting difference. V'adamer of Chisda no'atz kana b'rishus hayachid. If you stuck a pole in the Rishus HaYachid, or b'roishay traskel, and on top of it was a tray. The pole towered high up in the air, and on top of it was a tray. V'noch al gabav, and it rested, you threw it from a Rishus HaRabim, and it rested on top of the tray. Afilu gevaya mea ama, even if the tray is 100 amas high, chayiv. Why? Lefi shirishus hayachid oila ad rekia. The domain of the private domain reaches up till the sky. The tray was an area of Dalit al Dalit, so it's considered a hanacha. And therefore, since it came from the Rishus HaRabim, you're chai. As we welcome in Yehuda from Yerushalayim, it's nice to have you. I guess it's pretty early in the morning in Yerushalayim, so good morning to you. You notice he says from Yerushalayim instead of from Har Nof, so he must be in Yerushalayim. He's getting closer to the Kedusha. Anyway, but it's only by Hilchas Shabbos that we say this. Hani million Shabbos. But if a get lands there, it's not protected. There's no walls around the tray. And here it's not protected. And finally, says the Gemara, as we turn to Daf Ayin Tes Amid Beis, V'hadam Rabbi Yudam Shmuel Lo Yamad Adam Begag Zeh. This is an interesting halacha. You have two roofs. The house on the right is owned by Shelley Zeitler. The house on the left is owned by Rabbi Kranz. They have adjoining rooftops. They didn't make an Erev. Can Shelley scoop from some water from his roof, from Rabbi Kranz's roof to his roof, without an Erev? You can't stand on one roof and scoop up some water from Rabbi Kranz's roof without an Erev Tavshilin, an Erev Chatziris. I said Erev Tavshilin. I meant an Erev Chatziris. Shekeshem shediyurin chalukim milmalta, just like we consider them to be different occupants below, even though they're adjoining roofs and they're not used, rooftops are not used regularly like a courtyard, still kach diyurin chalukim milmal. But that's only Hani Mili Indian Shabbos. But if, let's say, Chatzkel owns 2 adjoining rooftops, and he gave her one rooftop and the get landed on the other rooftop, so you'll say, maybe we should say the rule of Chad Mokum Moishli Inshe and Shtei Mekaymis Loi Moishli Inshe. So if it lands on Chatzkel's other rooftop, she shouldn't be divorced. Hani Mililin is Shabbos. Avali Indian get Mishim Kepedo. By get, people are makbid. By a house, I gave you permission to come into one house, not into the second house. But there's no akbada if you gave him permission to be on one roof, to be on the other adjoining roof. The kulahai loikopte inshe. So if he gave her one roof and the get landed on the other roof, she would be divorced. Now, here the Gemara talks about an interesting case. Very interesting. Amar Abaya, Shtei Chatzeres zu lifnim mizu. There are 2 courtyards, one within the other. Pnim Shalah. The inner courtyard belongs to Sarah, the wife. V'chitzayna Shaloi. The outer courtyard belongs to him. Umechitzas hachitzaynais oitfais ala pnimiyos. The wall of her courtyard, of her inner courtyard, only goes up 5 feet. The walls of his outer courtyard go up 10 feet. But they're his walls. Again, her inner courtyard is enclosed only by walls that are 5 feet high. His outer courtyard is enclosed by walls that are 10 feet high. Now he's, he really knows how to throw. He's a pro football player. And he throws the get, and it sails within the airspace of the inner courtyard, 8 feet above the inner courtyard. It starts its descent, and then it rains, and it gets erased. But it already started the descent into her inner courtyard, but it was only 8 feet off the ground, so it wasn't enclosed and protected by her walls. It's only protected by his outer walls, which were 10 feet high. Interesting case. So let's see the Gemara inside. Amar Abaya, Shtei Chatzeres zu lefnim mizu. There's 2 courtyards, one within the other. Pnim is Shalah. The inner courtyard is hers. The chitzayna Shalai. The outer courtyard is his. And the outer walls of his courtyard, remember we said her walls only tower 5 feet high, his walls are 10 feet high. And he throws the get, and it enters the ear space of her courtyard. It's on the descent, and it's within, let's say, it started its descent at 8 feet. So it's protected from his outer walls, but not her walls. Right? Harizuma Gereshes. Now, why is that? We would think that it has to be protected by her walls. So my time, huh? The reason is because Pnimis Gufa, because it's considered like she has a shear in the outer walls, because normally the outer walls protect her inner courtyard. Because Pnimis Gufa b'mechitzas achitzayna kamintra. However, says the Gemara, Masha ein kain bekupais. So we take out the Talmudic scalpel and we make a very subtle chiluk over here. Very nuanced chiluk. Masha ein kain bekupais. If you have boxes, he has a big box, and inside his box, she has a smaller box. Shtei kupais zu b'seich zu, pnim is shalah, the inner box is hers, v'chitzayna shalai, and the outer box is his. V'zor kula, and he throws it to her. Afilu higia la'aver pnimis, even if it reaches within the ear space of the inner box, Eina Megreshes, says the Gemara, she's not divorced. And this is even if the get reaches within the ear space of the walls of her inner box, she's not divorced. My timer, what's the reason? The haloinach. Now, why is it different? Why don't we say it should be acquired by the ear space? The answer is that the walls of a box are made to contain items, but not to protect the ear space. It's different than the walls of a courtyard. But the Gemara asks a very obvious question over here. Even if it rests, she shouldn't be divorced. Because when it rests, it's Kalev shel the Isha, Kalev shel Keach Bereshus Meicher. Because her box is sitting in his box. Says Gemara, V'chinach Mayhave, Kalev shel Keach Bereshus Meicher. Says the Gemara, Hachaba Mayaskinan. You know what we're talking about over here? Bekupa she'ein la shalayim. It's talking about boxes that have no bottom. And they're not resting in his property. Either they're resting in the Rishus Harabim, or they're resting in a third party's property, or they're resting in her property. So it's not Kalev Shalokeach Bereshus Meicher. And now we're going to talk about something that we talk about all the time, but this is the source of the Mishnah. And that is if a man writes a get, and he dates it, and then before he gives it to her, he is alone in a room with her for the time to have intimacy. So that is considered a get yoshin. So is a get yoshin good? So here we have a machlokes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. This is mikulei Beis Shammai or mechumrei Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai oimim poiter adam ishtoi beget yoshin. A person could send away his wife, lo yaleinu, with a get yoshin. Or Beis Hillel oisrin. So first of all, what's a get yoshin? What's a get yoshin? Ve'ez a get yoshin? Kol shenisyachet imar me'achar shekosov l'ha. If he was alone with her for the time that they could have relations, after he wrote it. So Beis Shammai says you can give such a get, Beis Hillel says not. Now the question is, why can't you give such a get? The answer is because we're afraid maybe when he was alone with her, he slept with her. And then he'll give the get with the date, and then she'll have a child. And people will say that the child was born after the get, out of wedlock. And it'll cast a pagam on the child. But my kamifligi, Beis Shammai savrei lo yamrina gzeira shema yomer gita kaidem lebna. They're not worried that they might say that the get preceded the child. Beis Hillel savrei amrina gzeira shema yomer gita kaidem lebna. Now, let's say he was alone with her, and they gave the get. And with that get, she went ahead and married. Does she have to leave her husband? So, says the Gemara, Amar Rav Abba Amar Shmuel. Rav Abba says in the name of Shmuel, Tzviki, it's great to see you. Amar Rav Abba Amar Shmuel, Im nisis loy teitze. If in the event, it's okay. Nisis loy teitze. If she gets married, she doesn't have to leave the second husband. The Iked Amrei, Rav Abba says even more. if the get was given already, she could lechatchila get married. She could marry in the first instance. Okay, now Rabbi said we're going to learn the Mishnah Yomis. I also will tell you that you should be on the lookout for, if you didn't hear the Chumash here already, it is in middle of being broadcast on TorahAnytime.com, but you could also catch the whole shir now on YouTube, or you could wait till they archive it in TorahAnytime.com, probably sometime tomorrow, or you could get it on Kol HaLashon. Sometime. What?
Matzah Shabbos?
Matzah Shabbos shir will be at 10:15, 5 minutes earlier, and next week shir will be 5 minutes earlier as well at 8:35. At 8.
Is there time for a question?
Okay,
These cases we're just learning, like with the kupos,
right.
is this only in a case where it was raining, for example, and it was nimchak, but if it wasn't nimchak, then there's no shiloh?
Well, there's no shiloh because it's going to land. And once it's land, it's definitely in her box.
So if it gets washed out, how do you prove what it was?
What?
It doesn't say anything.
You have to, the Adam signed it.
Their signature still stands?
No, but they testified that they saw what was written on it.
As he threw it?
Right.
Didn't switch it, no sleight of hand or anything?
Right, no slave hand, no.
Okay.
No magicians.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Have a good Shabbos.
Yay, Saba.
Rabbi, I asked a separate question. I sent you a text about sending you some funds through Zelle. What's the reference on that?
Yeah, my Zelle number, both Zelle and PayPal, is rmmwsi@aol.com.